Candilejas, teatro y espectáculo con César Vidal.
We're back for this very special moment that we have at the end of the Friday program. You know that, of course, from Monday to Friday to Thursday, we have very important people finishing our program. Sometimes they are talking about psychology, sometimes they are talking about literature, sometimes they are talking about economics, and they are first-class persons. But you know that deep in the bottom of my heart, I feel especially inclined to this interview of the Friday night. And I'm so inclined because we have always very special people. Sometimes these special people are people who are related to a worldwide audience. We have, directors, they won the Oscar in the past. We have this ballerina that is dancing right now over all the world. Sometimes there are people who are known, but only in their countries. And we want that these persons, because it's possible they are very well known in Mexico, in Argentina, in Spain, but we want that they are known, that they become known over all the world. And sometimes we have two very special people, but very, very limited to the limits of a region of the world. And we want that you know them because they are very special. The person that we have as our guest this week is a very, very special person. He has written a book that I have read in the last weeks and that had impressed very much because it's an incredible witness of one of the most important problems right now over all the world. But he's very special because his life has been very peculiar, exceptional, and special. Well, I could tell you that our guest is a Palestinian, but he's not Muslim. Because he's a born-again Christian. He's not, of course, a terrorist because he believes in the non-violence, and he is a person who has fought in a real way during decades for the freedom and the justice in Palestine, in the rest of the world. I could tell you a lot of things about this. He is co-founder of the Palestinian human rights group Al-Haq. He is co-founder of Nonviolence International. He's a very well-known international human rights attorney who is practicing in US, in Palestine, in Israel, and he serves even on the board of the Bethlehem Bible College, and as well is president of the board of Holy Land Trust. I could tell you more things about him, but I think it's better that we listen directly from him. His name is Jonathan Kuttab. Mr. Kuttab, marhaba, sabah al-khairi, of, if you prefer, Boker Tov, Mar Kuttab.
Thank you very much. Thanks to you and to all your listeners worldwide. I wish you all a very pleasant day.
I have read your book, The Truth Shall Set You Free. It's an incredible book that I recommend to everybody who's listening right now. And you begin the book telling the story of a Palestinian who was wounded by Israeli settler, who was robbed and who was abandoned, left while he was bleeding. Well, this is a real hard story. This kind of a story is very common in the occupied territories of Palestine by Israel, or this is something very exceptional?
No, this is very common and very typical. As I explained in the beginning of the story, this is our daily reality. the fact that it is not known to the outside world, maybe even not believed by the outside world, framed the basis for my life of advocacy. We need to find the truth, and we need to spread the truth so that people will see it. The evidence has to be very carefully collected, avoiding bias, following the highest principles of truth and accuracy in order to be believed.
Which was your first contact with the Israeli occupation in 1967?
Yes, because I was born after 1948. I was born in 1952. So my first direct experience with the Israelis was in 1967 when the occupation of the West Bank and Gaza started. At that time, I was not involved at all in anything political because my conservative Christian beliefs were not to be involved in politics, but to be more concerned about salvation of souls and about the spiritual life. And I would have liked to stay away from politics, except politics didn't stay away from me. The political reality was forced upon me and upon other Palestinians, of course.
What did mean this occupation that you faced when you was, well, a little child?
Well, the idea behind the Zionist movement was to create a Jewish state in Palestine. And if you have a Jewish state, every non-Jew who lives there, whether he's a Christian or a Muslim, is basically a problem because you want to make it as Jewish as France is French. And if this is your goal, you have to make life difficult for non-Jews. In fact, as much as possible, you have to push them out, and you have to bring in as many Jews as you can so that you can become a Jewish majority and a Jewish state.
So that means that other populations who are not Jewish are condemned to be expelled or to be a kind of under situated population.
Correct. This is inevitable. Sometimes I talk to Israeli Jewish friends, and they say, "No, Zionism is not racism. We welcome, we can accept other people." But the truth is, they don't. They do not accept them, and the state of Israel has worked very hard on maintaining a Jewish state for the Jews so that they can give rights to Jews, but they can take them away from non-Jews as much as they can, whether physically removing them or accepting them as second or third class citizens.
I have talked even with Jews that are coming from different backgrounds. And for example, the Jews coming from Arabic countries, for example, from Iraq, complain that they are treated as second class citizens in Israel. And they were complaining that they were obligated to leave, for example, Iraq to go to Israel with false flag operations. And they were very sorry because they were very happy in these Arabic countries. This was their language, their culture, and they have arrived to Israel and they had found, well, we are second class citizens, even being Jews. So that I think that the situation of Palestinians must be worse.
Of course, it is much worse. Actually, the State of Israel was created in response to a lot of oppression and anti Semitism and hatred of Jews in the West. It's a Western phenomena rather than a Middle Eastern phenomena. And the solution that Herzl and the Zionists came was, let us set up a state for the Jews. We will never be secure or safe or accepted or equal anywhere in the world. We must have our own state that is just for the Jews, where we can be lords and masters. In many ways, anti Semitism and Zionism are closely related. They both say that the Jews don't belong in whatever country they are in, that they belong only in Israel. They say that Jews will never be safe or secure or treated with equality, but they must have their own state and to be very powerful and to defend themselves against the rest of the world. I believe that anti-Semitism or hatred of Jews is wrong. It's a sin, and it's something that is, my people are not paying the price for what happened in Europe, because the Holocaust took place in Germany, the pogroms in Russia and Poland, the Inquisition in Spain. These are Western evils that are now, they try to compensate for them by taking away the rights of Palestinian Arabs.
I want to go back to your childhood. You are surprised in 1967 by the 6 Days War. There's an expansion of Israel invading, well, of course, the Golan Heights in Syria, the Sinai in the case of Egypt, but also the West Bank and Gaza and Eastern Jerusalem in the land of Palestine. Of course, this is going to create a lot of anger, a lot of hate. This is very logical. How could you take away this hate, take away this anger, and adopt a non-violent view? How is this possible? How could you do this?
Well, it is only possible if we provide for justice. Whenever there is injustice, this creates anger, this creates frustration, this creates oppression, this creates an evil that needs to be stopped and that needs to be ended. The challenge for me was, how do I do that as a Christian? How do I do that as a follower of Jesus Christ? How do I do that without submitting to hatred and violence and becoming the same as my enemies? How can I maintain the message of Jesus, which was a positive message? It was a positive message that says, love your enemy, not kill them. That says, turn the other cheek. That says, work for the kingdom of God, not for the kingdoms of this world. In many ways, I had a theological task to fulfill before I could begin to deal with the realities which were forced upon me by the Israeli occupation.
So that the belief in Jesus has been decisive uh, to you to pass over the line of the hate.
Yes, and I am not going to say that it was easy.
No,
it
no,
is
sure.
it is a continuing battle, because it is natural to feel anger. It is natural to feel hatred. It is natural to strike back against those who are oppressing you. It is natural to turn to violence. We are even told that biologically we are trained to have fight or flight, to either fight or you run away. Uh, Jesus says, no, there's a better way. There's a different way. You don't have to fight evil with evil. You have to fight it with good. You have to find a different method that allows you to communicate even with your enemy, that allows you to think of the best rather than the worst of the other people that you relate to.
Uh,
Uh,
No. Keep talking.
So this is not an easy path to follow. And many times I have big discussions with other Palestinians. They tell you, what do you mean? They don't understand anything except the language of force. It's very interesting that both sides think that their enemy only understands the language of force. And I say that that's not necessarily true. Maybe it is possible for us to find another language to communicate with each other rather than just killing each other and destroying each other, because that only creates more hate.
Many times, very often, we listen that Israel is the only democracy of Near East, of Middle East. And it's true, Israel has free parties, has elections, but, for example, has also a regular practice of torture. Why is legal the torture in Israel, and how often Israel is using the torture against Palestinians?
Well, torture is one of several things. We can also talk about other undemocratic practices in Israel. In fact, Israel may be a democracy, even though it is becoming less so for Jews, but not for Arabs. In the same way that you can have slavery in the United States,
Yeah.
and you cannot claim to be democratic as long as you are enslaving people. Torture is one of the methods that are used to keep people under suppression. If you believe you are doing the right thing, then anything is allowed in order to achieve your objectives. If you have to torture people, you torture them. If you have to kill them, you have to kill them. If you have to impose restrictions on their movement, you impose restrictions. If you have to take their land away from them and deport them from the country, or use collective punishment, or abuse their human rights, almost everything is justified by calling it security. This is necessary for our security. We are trying to protect ourselves, our people, our system of government from all its enemies. And before long, you end up with the current situation where you're actually committing genocide in order to defend your people.
I have seen that the torture generally in Israel has two acts. In the first act, the Israelis torture this Palestinian, this Arab, but in the second act, when this Palestinian has been broken under the torture, he's taken to a policeman that is going to write the so supposed confession. Uh, and the torture in the first act is a situation that is totally legal in Israel. The decision in the occupied territories are decisions of the military authority of occupation. Is there any kind of protection in the Israeli courts against these military decisions, or really the Israeli army does whatever he wants in the occupied territories?
Well, for a long time, I thought that the Israeli courts can act as a restriction or as a restraint for Israeli torture or Israeli land acquisition or Israeli discrimination. I am sorry to say that that has not been the case. In fact, the Israeli court has been a part of the problem because they provide justification, they provide excuses, they provide a rationale for the behavior of the Israeli army. Usually they say it more politely. They say it is outside our competence. We leave it to the experts who are the army people to decide what is necessary and what is not necessary. Because Israel does not have a constitution, and Israel does not have a system to control what the military does. But even when it does, even when there are some appeals to the Israeli courts, the courts themselves, even though they are independently racist. They are independently discriminatory because they believe the structure of the state that it should serve Jews and Jews only. It's a Jewish state. They keep telling us, and therefore, as a Jewish state, it has to favor and support what they believe is good for the Jews, not what is required by humanity, by international law, by decency, or anything else like that.
What you are telling us is remembering me a lot the past apartheid system where there was no doubt a democracy for white people, a small participation in this democracy to the colored people, and no democracy at all and different laws to the black people. I see that in Israel, they have not the equal law for Israelis, for the Jewish people, and for the Arabs living in the occupied territories. It's so?
Yes, that is true. And in fact, when we talk about apartheid in Israel, many times they tell you, "Oh, but we are different from South Africa." Yes, there are differences, and in many ways, it's much worse than South Africa. The what makes apartheid an illegal and illegitimate thing is when you have one group that tries to dominate others and uses the law in order to dominate them, and uses certain practices such as collective punishment, deportation, torture, denial of the right of self-determination, denial of rights under international law. And this is the problem that we have in Israel. Not that it is like South Africa, but that it is discriminatory. That's why it is called apartheid. Apartheid is a system of government that is built on oppressing people and violating their rights.
These are the reasons because of them you did become lawyer, attorney.
That is probably true. I find in law a very useful tool. I call it the weapons of light against the forces of darkness. Because law, even bad laws, are better than no laws. They bring some measure of control over the arbitrary power which has no rules to it. And because law is based on rules, they have to be applied with equality. And if they are not applied with equality, you can see on its face that the law itself is unjust and improper and ultimately illegal. This is why I try to use law as an instrument to show what is the system like, to test out the system and their claim to be democratic. They claim to be democratic, so you have to give them a chance. You have to go to court and present your evidence and then lose and say, see why I lost. I lost not because I was wrong, but because the law itself is illegal and illegitimate and unjust.
The international law recognized the legitimacy of the armed resistance of a people whose territory is occupied by a foreign power, so that in terms of the international law, Palestinians could perfectly have an armed resistance against the Israeli occupiers. Why have you decided to follow a non-violent road? Why non-violence instead of violence, the armed
Well,
fight?
there are two reasons. One, of course, is because I'm a Christian. I believe that Jesus called us to not use violence, not kill other people, uh, because there is a better way than violence. So my conscience does not allow me to kill another person. So this is one reason. But there is also another reason. Because of the peculiar situation that we are living under, violence reinforces the basis for the state of Israel. Violence, we cannot out violence the Israelis. They are so full of weapons, of violence, of technology, of nuclear weapons, of advanced weapons, of destructive weapons. Never mind that they also have the support of the United States. They are so full of weapons that if we try to just out violence the Israelis, it is a horrible thing. They can destroy whole cities. We have to do the same, destroy whole cities. How is that going to help us find a solution? I think that in the case of the Palestinian people today, even if they were not pacifists like me, even if they believe they have the right to armed struggle, we would be much better if we use other methods than violence. And in fact, we have. There are many aspects of Palestinian struggle that have been non-violent. Unfortunately, only the violent methods attract the attention of the media and attract the attention of everybody. Now, even in Gaza, they tried what's called the March of Return, which was a peaceful walk towards the border, saying we want to return to our land. And Israeli snipers killed 62 people in one single day. If you get close enough to us, we kill you.
It,
And
it,
so people said, it's not working. We have to use violent means to break through this wall that is surrounding us, that's besieging us, that's preventing us from having our rights. And they did. This is what happened on October 7th. It was a violent response to the siege of Gaza. And even though they killed hundreds of soldiers, they also killed civilians, which is wrong. And they took civilian hostages, which is also wrong under international law. So even if you decide to use armed struggle, you have to also follow the rules of international law and avoid targeting civilians in your actions.
so that you have two reasons. One of them is spiritual, you are Christian, and the second one is tactic. The violence cannot be the solution, but the non-violence could be.
That is correct.
Okay, well, I have read your book, The Truth Shall Set You Free. Your biography is very, very interesting. We cannot tell all your biography, but there are several things that are very interesting to me, and I want that the people who is listening the program could know it. For example, which was your role in the agreement between Israel and the PLO? During decades, the PLO was called a terrorist organization by Israel, but at last they recognized that it was representing the Palestinians, and they sit together at the table. And you have a very important role in this, Israel and the PLO sitting at the table. Which was exactly your role?
Well, I was asked to head the legal committee that negotiated the Cairo Agreement, which set up the Palestinian Authority. This was part of the Oslo process. Many Palestinians today think that the whole thing was a mistake, that it was a trick, that Israel never really believed in allowing Palestinians to have a state. But at that time, other Palestinians, myself included, thought that this is a chance to have a compromise. Even though it doesn't give us all our rights, it gives us some rights. It allows for what is called a two-state solution, where Palestinians would accept a Palestinian state in only 22% of Palestine, and give up their claim to the rest. It was a painful compromise for many people, but it is better, I thought, than war and fighting. In the end, the Israelis, I think, tricked us. They did not follow through with their promises. Maybe part of it is because Rabin was assassinated, Prime Minister Rabin, who followed this system. Maybe they never really ever believed that peace was possible, and this was just a trick to get Palestinians to stop the Intifada, which at that time was making the West Bank and Gaza no longer controllable. So they wanted to have Palestinians control their own people.
To many of us, I include myself, the Oslo Agreement was a very good news. We believe that this was the beginning to a road that is going to end in the creation of a Palestinian state, and that Israeli army retreating from the occupied territories. Well, it was very hard. It was very hard to me to find that the Israelis didn't fulfill their part of the agreement. They have built up more and more settlements in the area that was going to be a part of the territory of the Palestinian state. But recently, I think maybe half and 1 year ago, I watched a documentary, The Gatekeepers, I think was his name, that was interviewing the directors of the Mossad. And several of them recognized that really Israel never wanted to fulfill, to be faithful, to honor the Oslo Agreement. Do you agree with this vision?
Well, that is certainly the way it turned out. There is no question that the settler movement has systematically undermined any possibility of peace with the Palestinians by building settlements, like you said, in the same area that was supposed to
Yeah.
become a Palestinian state. Many people said, see, they never intended in the first place. They were just playing with you. They were just joking with you. They were just making fun of you. They never really intended to make peace. Maybe that's true. And I'm certainly willing to say that I, in a way, contributed by going along with this process in the hope that it would create a peace which it never did.
Well, I think, Mr. Kuttab, that any person listening you tonight is discovering that the history didn't begin 7th October. Well, any person listening the media in the West can have the idea that the problems between Israelis and Palestinians began the 7th Octobers when wildly and ruthlessly the Palestinians attacked the Israelis. No, this is a history, a very sad and tragic history that began several decades ago. But it's true that this 7th October began a new war, and this new war is not only in Gaza, but also in the West Bank, in Eastern Jerusalem, and even in Lebanon right now. What has been happening in Gaza during the last year?
Well, what's been happening in Gaza during the last year is a clear genocide. Whole communities were being destroyed. And I don't just mean the fighting forces of the Palestinians and Hamas, but all the universities, for example, were destroyed. Some of them were used as an army base for 2 months. And then when they left, they destroyed the whole university. All the universities were destroyed. Most of the hospitals were destroyed. All the infrastructure, the water, the electricity, the sewage, the fields, the factories, the building blocks were systematically destroyed. And then the Israelis forced the people out of their homes. And this is a continuing thing. This is happening even today. Even though it is just impossible to think, when will this even end? Because Israel continues to attack. Somehow the Israelis think that maybe this will be so bad that it will create a deterrence in the future so that Palestinians will not attack Israel again. The truth, however, is that it does not create deterrence. It creates more hatred, and it creates more likelihood that there will continue to be fighting even in the future. So far, we have a small, tiny area which is only 20 miles long and about 5 to 8 miles wide, which was home to 2.3 million people, most of them refugees. This area has been shrunk down to almost less than 20% of its size, with the other 80% completely, totally destroyed. With Israel continuing to control that area and prevent anybody from coming in or out of there. I don't know what other word can be used other than genocide. This is really killing people, killing a whole people.
Well, even Israeli authors that are specialized in genocide have recognized from the beginning that this was a genocide. I have talked about this person in my program, and they are people specialized in genocides, in the history of the Holocaust, and even in the history of the German army during World War II. By the way, I have seen that you know very well the Bible. There are some pages in your book that are showing this in a very clear way. And I have seen that you had faced persons who tries to give legitimacy to the situation that now has Israel as the center. For example, these persons that talk about God giving the land to Israel in an unconditional way. But you remember that the land is under condition. And for example, in Deuteronomy chapters 28 and 29 is teaching in a very clear way that if Israel is not faithful to the covenant and is not obeying the covenant, of course, is going to be evicted, to be expelled from the land, as it has happened several times in the past. And you remember something that I can understand that it's not understandable to Jews, but it's very clear, must be very clear for any Christian, and it's the idea of the descendants of Abraham, the persons who descend from Abraham, and this is very clear, for example, in Galatians 3, are the persons who believe in Jesus, not the persons who belong to a special race, but the persons who have the same faith of Abraham in Jesus as the Messiah and the Son of God. This is elementary. How do you explain that these things that are so clear in the Bible are denied by persons telling not Israel has an unconditional gift of the land, not the only descendants of Abraham are Jews, etc., etc.?
Well, as you said, the people who take this position really don't know their Bible very well,
It's totally true.
and they don't know the situation on the ground very well. Many of them I think, are fooled. They are lied to. They are being deceived by Christian Zionists, especially, who have an interest in promoting the state of Israel, but who don't necessarily believe in the Bible.
That's true. I
Uh,
agree with you.
so these people, I think, are leading people astray. But there's also another aspect which people don't like to talk about, and that is some people are so they feel so guilty about what the church did to the Jews during the many years, and how Christian theology was used to justify killing the Jews, that they are now reluctant to look at the Bible as for what it says. They're saying, no, this is called displacement theology. You are avoiding the truth about the Jewish people. And the Jewish people, of course, are important to God, just like all people are important to God. Because people have to understand that even when God promised the land to the Jews, it wasn't for their sake, it was for His sake, so that they can become the vehicle of salvation for all mankind, so that through Jesus, all the nations of the world shall be blessed, not through Israel or Benjamin Netanyahu. It's through Jesus that salvation comes, and it is open to all nations, not just to the Jewish nations. So people make this confusion between what Israel wants and what God ultimately wants for all people. Because I believe God loves all people, Jewish people and non-Jewish people as well.
No, this is very clear to any person who has a minimal knowledge of the Bible, and well, I think this is something related to the dispensationalism, that is, it's a scatological school that was born in 19th century. This is yesterday in terms of the history of Christianity. Well, the last question, I don't want to abuse you. Which is going to be the exit of this conflict? Or, according to your opinion, what could be the solution for this conflict? The end of the blood, of the suffering, of the pain?
Well, I don't know. I fear we are going to see a lot more suffering and pain before we see the end. And I can tell you what I think is the solution. But I think more importantly, we should ask, what are the elements of the solution that we should pursue? And these elements, I think, start with nonviolence. War cannot be the answer. Israel cannot destroy the Palestinian people, and the Palestinian people cannot destroy the Jewish people. There must be a solution that's not based on more weapons, but on diplomacy and other things. Number two, another element that's important is justice. There has to be fairness. This cannot be just, I am more powerful, I can get my way, I can do what I want. Because the other side also thinks that even if we are not powerful now, we can become powerful. So everybody is trying to get more weapons and more destruction and more violence. So the solution has to have an element of justice and fairness. We also need to have international law. We cannot have every country just decide, I will do what I want and I don't care what the rest of the world thinks. There must be an element of international law involved in resolving the problems, especially because there are so many different parties involved. You cannot satisfy everybody unless you start with an element of law, of international law, of respect for human rights, of respect for equality. Equality needs to be a very important element. And there must be involvement of other parties as part of the solution, not part of the problem. So these are some of the elements that are required in any solution. If somebody says, I have a solution, but he doesn't meet the test of fairness, doesn't meet the test of equality, doesn't meet the test of peace, but instead must be applied by tremendous force, forcing people to follow what you want, that is not a solution. That is only a continuation of a very bad system.
Several months ago, I interviewed, like I'm interviewing you right now, an American Jewish that, well, she's a specialist in sociology, and she was telling me, I'm afraid and I'm frightened because of that in Israel they are repeating the behavior of the abused people, of these abused children that become grown adults, and they repeat the abuse they have suffered before in other persons. And she was telling me, well, I think that this is the problem. The Jews, we have suffered a lot during centuries, and now we have a state, and we are repeating the same kind of abuses, of oppression, of violence that we have received before. I don't know if this theory is right or not, but I'm sure that this is eroding, and this is eating up, and this is destroying the moral fiber of Israel. And I think there had been many Israelis, for example, Yeshayahu Leibovitz, that was, well, a very interesting Israeli philosopher that coined the term Israeli Nazis, Jew Nazis, because,
Judeo-Nazis.
yeah, Judeo Nazis, right. Because he thought, well, when a state admits the use of torture, of oppression, etc., well, he's behaving like Nazis, even if the person behaving so has a name that is, for example, Ariel Sharon. And now we could say, for example, Benjamin Netanyahu. So that this, I think, this is not only a fight pro-Palestinians to receive the end of oppression and justice and equality before the law. This is a fight also in benefit of Israel, because the soul of Israel is rotting. And it's rotting because it's impossible to oppress and make violence and kill and torture your neighbor, and to become not rotten in a moral way.
This
Well,
is
yeah.
this is very true, I think. And I remember, yeah, man, the experience of the Jewish people, particularly the Holocaust, was horrendous. And I remember one Jewish person who said, after the Holocaust, there's only two kinds of Jew, as well as two kinds of human being. those who say, never again will we allow this to happen to us. We'll do whatever it takes. We don't care what is the law. We don't care what is international this. We have to be powerful. We have to be strong. Never again to allow this to happen. And then there's the others who say, never again will we allow this to happen to anybody.
Yeah.
We have to work for international law. We have to work for human rights. We have to work against racism and against exploitation and against discrimination by anybody. And then it becomes a better world for all of us.
And I think this is the real lesson of the Holocaust. That, by the way, I have written about several books in the past. Well, Mr. Kuttab, I must thank you, your patience, your kindness in this interview. And in the past, when these interviews were done in a radio set, I used to give one of my books to the person like you that were so kind and so nice and so patient. I signed the book. I told them, well, you are not obligated to read it. This is only a small token thanking you. But this is not possible right now in internet, so that I leave persons like you a melody, a song, to thank you for your kindness and your patience. And I have chosen for you old song of the time of the civil rights non-violent fight in US, a Christian song, but a song asking for freedom, asking for justice, asking for equality before the law. The song is entitled Oh Freedom. And I hope that someday you and me and other persons can celebrate that Palestine is a country under freedom with justice and equality for everybody. Well, thank you very much indeed for your time and your kindness. Till the next time, and God bless you.
Thank you.